The following is a national address of the Minister of Education and Technical and Vocational Training, the Honorable Glenys Hanna on the Return to School Campuses 2022.
My fellow Bahamians, my brothers and sisters, good evening. I speak to you tonight on the eve of children returning to classrooms nationally for face-to-face instruction in the hybrid model. It's a big day. For public school students, this will be the first time in many months, and for some, the first time in 2 years. I think it's important to establish at the outset that COVID-19 is more than a public health crisis. It has also created what is likely to be a more enduring crisis in education, which will likely have serious impact long after the last days of this pandemic. These serious impacts relate to the quality of life many of our children will experience into adulthood and the state of our collective progress and our social and economic health as a Bahamian people. So I begin at the outset by declaring this is not about me or you, except collectively we are called upon to fully understand this crisis and to respond appropriately in our responsibility to future generations, to create appropriate policies and responses for our children. There's been much research globally on the impact of COVID-19 on education. Countries everywhere are facing identical challenges and similar prospects. The potential outcomes, though, for countries such as ours are much more dire unless we are resolute in our pursuit of a focused, selfless course of action to reverse and avert what will otherwise be a devastating blow to our future prospects as a Bahamian people. We are in an emergency. There is no time or space for old strategies or stale responses. We do not have the luxury. So it's necessary that there is a collective consciousness of where we are. The circumstances are risk-filled. We must have a collective commitment to fight ourselves out of this dilemma and to do all that we must to save our children. The last 2 years have been unrelenting disruptions in education. The fully virtual learning experience has proven to be difficult for student, teacher, and parent alike for a variety of reasons. And this has been especially so for children with special needs and children from lower economic communities. We also know that thousands of children have fully fallen off the radar, having been absent from school for 2 years. These children span the range of preschool to grade 12. Where are these children now? And what will be their fate? We are in an emergency. In a recent UNESCO, UNICEF, and World Bank joint report, the question is asked, and I quote, "How should decision makers and the international community respond to the growing global education crisis?" The answer, and I quote, "Reopening schools and keeping them open must be the top priority globally." While nearly every country in the world offered remote learning opportunities for students, the quality and reach of such initiatives varied, and in most cases, they offered a poor substitute for in-person instruction. Stemming and reversing learning losses, especially for the most vulnerable students, requires in-person schooling. And I end quote. Every week lost in learning is damaging to our children. For this reason, the Davis administration has always remained insistent on the need to open schools for face-to-face learning. We were initially held up by the fact that the previous administration had not made progress on school repairs during the time of school closures. We acted on that issue immediately, and we were set to resume in-person learning on January 11th. Well, as we all know, that plan was delayed by the emergence of the highly contagious Omicron variant that resulted in record levels of COVID-19 infections throughout the country. We could not simply allow schools to reopen without considering this new threat. The Ministry of Education regrouped, planned, and collaborated with the Ministry of Health to come up with a hybrid approach that we believe allows for in-person learning to be conducted as safely as possible. I want to be clear. We fully expected that the necessary preparations were being made for the January 11th reopening. And when that reopening was postponed, the Minister of Health, myself, and the Prime Minister all made it clear that we did not anticipate that the reopening would be delayed for very long and that the country should brace for an imminent return to school. At the end of December, I stated that we expected the planned January 11th reopening to be postponed by 2 weeks, as we initiated further mitigation efforts to ensure that schools could reopen safely. On January 11th, in a conversation with media at Sybil Strawn Primary School, the Prime Minister indicated to the media that he expected schools to be reopened within 2 weeks. January 24th makes 13 days since the Prime Minister made that statement. So said, so done. We then provided an update several days in advance of the reopening of the 24th. Given the government's repeated communications to the public regarding the fact that the timeline for schools to reopen would be in a matter of weeks, we fully expect that education professionals remained at the ready for the eventual return to the classroom. The timeline may be a bit truncated for some, and we acknowledge that. But we must also acknowledge that we are in the midst of an educational crisis that demands a degree of urgency, especially given the delay that occurred on January 11th. Every day that our children remain out of school does further damage. The time to return to in-person learning is now. We are not living in ideal times, but we must do the best we can. Once we learned that the Ministry of Health and Wellness endorsed a school reopening by Monday, January 24th, it was announced that public schools would reopen for face-to-face education. The private schools have followed suit. There is no time to waste. But this first week, commencing the 24th of January, has been deemed a transitional week, allowing each individual school administration, teachers, students, and parents to reacclimatize to face-to-face instruction. In the first phase, children who do not have uniforms are free to come to school appropriately dressed. Going forward, we will work closely with the Ministry of Social Services to assure that children needing assistance are able to access same in an efficient manner. My brothers and sisters, we must get our children back into the classroom safely. In this regard, we have been fully guided by the manual and procedures outlined by the Ministry of Health and Wellness as to on-campus protocols, inclusive of the reduction in the number of students allowed on campus at any given time, mandatory mask wearing, ventilation, including maximized use of outdoors, mandatory social distancing, continuous observation and isolation where necessary. Additionally, the Ministry of Health and Wellness has initiated free testing, which children and teachers and all other stakeholders can access. In these circumstances, global evidence shows children can resume in-person learning safely. And this is where we know the process can begin for effective learning recovery and accelerated learning. This is where hope is restored and where we roll up our sleeves to ameliorate the fallout of COVID-19 on education. The Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training has in development a number of strategies which include diagnostic testing of every child in public school to ascertain the extent of learning loss. A learning recovery committee has been established by the ministry to provide recommendations and to develop strategies for appropriate responses and learning recovery programs based on the extent of learning loss of each child. These programs will focus primarily on the foundations of literacy and numeracy. This emergency is also an opportunity to redress the many long-standing deficiencies in our education system. In that joint research previously referred to, some valuable guidance is given to bring a focus on 6 areas. First, assessing student learning so instruction can be targeted to students' learning levels and specific needs. 2, investing in digital learning opportunities for all students, ensuring that technology is fit for purpose and focused on enhancing human interactions. 3, reinforcing support that leverages the role of parents, families, and communities in children's learning. 4, ensuring that teachers are supported and have access to practical, high-quality professional development opportunities, teaching guides, and learning materials. 5, increasing the share of education in the national budget allocation of stimulus packages and tying it to investments mentioned above that can accelerate learning. 6, investing in evidence building, in particular, implementation research, to understand what works and how to scale what works to the system level. In relation to this latter point, we have commissioned a study with the University of the Bahamas, which is now underway, to identify causative factors for learning outcomes in this country. The findings of this research will help guide future education policy for more positive student attainment. Additionally, the ministry has established a task force which has the responsibility of identifying all of the children who have been missing from school for extended periods, most for as much as 2 years, and in physically finding these children and facilitating appropriate interventions to address learning loss and accelerated learning. For older children, this may require engagement with tertiary institutions for special programs. That task force comprises education professionals, including special education and school psychological services, the Ministry of Social Services and Development, the Office of the Attorney General, the Bahamas Christian Council, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, BTVI, the National Training Agency, and representatives of the Bahamas Educators Managerial Union, the Bahamas Union of Teachers, and the Bahamas Education Counselors and Allied Workers Union. The launch of its work commenced several days ago in the Freetown community and will shortly spread out nationwide. And we have tasked ourselves to complete the identification of and intervention for these children in the shortest possible time. As previously stated, on taking office 4 months ago, we encountered a very anemic approach to summer school repair, with repairs limping along after the summer break, and in some cases with no apparent end in sight. This has posed yet another challenge. However, the collaborative efforts of the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Finance, the commitment of individual contractors, and the Prime Minister himself has resulted in an impressive acceleration of these works, most especially seen at Sybil Strawn Primary, C.W. Sawyer Primary, Yellow Elder Primary, and L.W. Young Junior High Schools. I'm advised, however, that recent discoveries in the last 72 hours by the Ministry of Works at T.A. Thompson Junior High School and at Uriah McPhee Primary School may require that in the short term, some students will have to remain in virtual learning. We are maintaining very close contact with the Ministry of Works and monitoring the progress of these works so as to gain a full understanding of what alternative strategies must be deployed, if any. However, it has become clear that many of our school plans are aging and suffering from a failure to maintain, and it is evident that what is ahead is a massive undertaking. We will therefore implement new strategies to cause for ongoing maintenance of our school plant to counter historic neglect, resulting in huge capital outlays, delays, and school closures. Since taking office in late September, and understanding that success in education requires a synergistic engagement of all stakeholders, I have met by Zoom with over 3,000 of our teachers and education professionals nationwide, and with principals and vice principals and district superintendents to understand firsthand their concerns, their ideas, and their vision for education. This has proven to be an invaluable process and will form the basis for further dialogue and new strategies to enhance morale and well-being and a positive productivity in education. I've also mandated a revision of the high school diploma requirements and curriculum reform, inclusive of a focus on literacy and numeracy, an enhanced platform for technical and vocational training, a more developed physical education program, a feeder program for the creative arts into a new tertiary institute for the performing arts now being developed, a new history curriculum with emphasis on Bahamian history, founded upon character development and an encouraged critical thinking. We're recruiting new teachers to address shortages with an emphasis on priority areas. But as pointed out by UNESCO, it is time to shift from crisis response to learning recovery. We must make sure that investments and actions for learning recovery lay the foundations for more efficient, equitable, and resilient education systems, systems that truly deliver learning and well-being for all children and youth. Only then we ensure learning continuity in the face of future disruption. End quote by UNESCO. My brothers and sisters, our children must be all that they can be. This is not about me. This is about the children. This is about the next generation. I know that many parents are anxious and even worried about what the future holds for their children. We must partner to ensure that your children are given the best opportunity possible. We pledge to do all that we can to achieve positive and even outstanding results for your children. I wish to thank the educators and specialized support professionals of this nation for your steadfast love and commitment to the building of our children. And I expect and appreciate the support of our teachers during this time. I know your job is not easy. I know that the past 2 years have been filled with lots of ups and downs and uncertainty. Our duty now is to take these critical steps towards certainty and normalcy. That begins with the introduction of the hybrid learning model that we are implementing, which we hope to transition to full in-person learning when it is safe to do so. We are taking this step so that we can lessen the current educational crisis and save a generation of our children, especially the most economically vulnerable, from irreparable learning loss. I am sure that this is something that every education professional can appreciate and get behind. I look forward to working with you all to make this happen over the course of the next week. We pledge to improving effective communication between ourselves. Please know, you have in this Davis administration a government which fully appreciates and understands your essential role in national development, and that you have in me a full partner in working with you to enhance and improve your profession. To the wider Bahamian community, we have eyes and ears, and we see the signals happening in this country. We must unify on the fundamentals and purposefully work together to take our country forward positively. My brothers and sisters, the road ahead is not easy, but we cannot and must not fail. We will not fail. We will cause for our precious children to be all that they can be, that they are freed to develop their God-given gifts, that they are literate and ethical and confident and proud and powerful, physically and mentally healthy, and imbued with an enlightened consciousness of who they are. I ask all of you to join hands with us as we embark on this very important and sensitive undertaking. I pledge to remain faithful and steadfast in my constitutional duty and as an empowered citizen of this beautiful nation. I end by repeating Psalm 30, verse 5. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. May God forever cause his face to shine upon our nation, especially the beautiful children of this nation. I thank you, and good night.
The proceeding was a national address by the Minister of Education and Technical and Vocational Training, the Honorable Glenys Hanna on the Return to School Campuses 2022. Learn more about our students' return to the hybrid model of education by viewing the following public service announcements produced by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training.
This public service announcement is brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel. When students return to school campuses on January 24th, 2022, primary schools will be divided into two groups. Aquamarine, and Black. Students in Group Aquamarine will attend school for face-to-face instruction on Mondays and Wednesdays, and Group Black on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On the 3 remaining weekdays, students will remain at home and complete their assignments set by their teacher using the Learning Management System, LMS, or hard copy packets. Fridays will be Intervention and Enrichment Day for selected students to attend the school for face-to-face instruction. For further information, contact your child's school or their Facebook page. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel.
Schools reopen on Monday, January 24th, 2022 using the hybrid model, a combination of face-to-face instruction and remote learning. Primary schools will be divided into 2 groups using a 5-day learning cycle. Group A, called Aquamarine, will have face-to-face instruction on Mondays and Wednesdays. Group B, called Black, will attend schools on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Fridays are intervention enrichment days for selected students from both groups to attend school. Secondary schools using a 6-day cycle are divided into 3 groups: Aquamarine, grades 7 and 10, Black, grades 8 and 11, Gold, grades 9 and 12. Each group will have 2 days of face-to-face instruction, 2 days of virtual learning, and 2 days of virtual intervention and enrichment classes for selected students.
This public service announcement is brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training. Log on and stay on. As parents, we will not always be present while our children engage in online learning. Ensure that your child is getting the most from the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training's Learning Management System. Here are some tips to help you establish your child's online learning routine. Number 1. Designate a workspace to reduce distraction. The bed is not recommended. Number 2. Each morning, ensure your child is alert and devices are ready to log on. Number 3. Periodically check in on your child by calling, texting, or FaceTiming to ensure that they are participating in their online classes. Number 4. Communicate with your child's teachers to stay updated on your child's progress and online attendance. Number 5. Remember, it takes a village to raise a child, so you can create a WhatsApp or other social media group with parents to share relevant information pertaining to your child's online education. Education is important. Log on and stay on. This public service announcement was brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel.
Hey, you! Yeah, you! I want you to understand something. Your children's education is very important. Don't pay no mind to this COVID-19 pandemic. Your children still gotta have their education. You hear me? The Ministry of Education still got their virtual school going on, you know. The reason I'm talking to you about this is because more than 8,000 Bahamian children ain't never log on to classes from March 2020. That's a long time for children to be without their education, you know. The mind is a terrible thing to waste. Now, the ministry needs you to ensure that your children log on and stay on. You know, plenty other children getting their education, you know. They logging on and they staying on. Where your children is? What happened to them? You need help? Call the school. Call the teacher. They just waiting to help you. So make sure the child register. They log on and stay on. And check on them every so often, man. And make sure they ain't skylocking or sleeping. And one more thing. Just make sure you ain't up and down past them children in your morning clothes with your cocktail. You see, they got a law on for attendance and in order to do their school work so that they could graduate with the Bahamas National High School Diploma. Our Bahamas need every child to live up to their potential. And parents, it starts with you.
This public service announcement was brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel.
Hey Shelly, what you saying, gal? I see you in a minute.
Yeah, I good. Give me 1 minute, let me take this call. Hello? Listen here, y'all need to stay from out that yard here and hurry up and clean the house before I get back. Goodbye. Sorry about that, gal.
Man, the gal that's your children you talking to? Why they in Richwood School? It's 11:45 in the morning. What happened? They ain't got no class today?
Shelly, one thing, but you always up in people's business. Listen here, I'm fortunate like you. I can't afford one device, let alone 3. Then the internet is be in and out and things. They ain't dead. They don't learn nothing on them computer, no way. The ministry need to open school back up face to face.
Gal, if you wasn't bigger than me, I would have cut your behind. First of all, I don't have it no better than you. The difference is, I can do what I need to do to make sure my children get their education. You think I rich? Gal, carry yourself and go to that school and tell them the children need their device. And internet off and on? That ain't no excuse. You know how much place around here the church and thing will let you use their space? And gal, stop talking fool. Cause I know you got family who the children could go by. Ain't nobody tell me that. I know that. Miss, get serious here before you ruin your children's life.
Shelly, like I say, you always up in people's business. But anyway, okay.
This public service announcement was brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel. Students without uniform must be dressed appropriately. Here's a list of what not to wear: Crocs, bubblegum jeans, shorts, open-toe slippers, graphic t-shirts, hoodies, t-shirts with words, furry clothes, glittery clothes, jewelry, spaghetti straps, hair extensions, This public service announcement was brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training. The Ministry of Education strongly encourages the wearing of school uniforms. However, in this recent statement, Education Director Marcellus Taylor acknowledges that uniforms might be a challenge for some parents.
We also want parents to realize too that although it would be nice for students to have uniforms, it's not imperative. Because really, more importantly at this time is for the students to come to school. So if you have the uniform, it's fine. But if you don't have the uniform, do not make that a deterrent for not sending your child.
Students without uniform must be appropriately attired and groomed with neutral colors only. No print and graphics are allowed. Chest and stomach areas must be covered. This public service announcement was brought to you by the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training in conjunction with this channel.
This has been a production of the Communications section of the Ministry of Education and Technical and Vocational Training.